Welcome. This is going to be Josh Monda's analysis from our camp. And this is Josh's, I think, third year at the camp. So we've got some other video from previous years that I'll show in so you can see some of the progress that he's made over the last few years, all the hard work he's been putting in. And what I'll do is just let this first portion of the video just play. You can watch it. There won't be an analysis, and then we'll go into the analysis. So thanks for tuning in. Okay, so here is Josh's analysis of his stroke. So, what we're looking at here is, his hips are pretty good position, head's not too high, shoulders about even. You can see in the endless pool, his feet are a little bit lower, and he doesn't have a ton of stability. You can see there's a lot of movement kind of to the sides, left and right in the pool. And, what we want to go back to are just the fundamentals, which is let's get long and high on the water. So the longer that water line is on the water, the more distance per stroke he's going to be able to get. Swimming distance per stroke is kind of that benchmark of stability, of efficiency. And, another kind of underlying fundamental thing in all of this is just stability in the water. And so it doesn't matter the sport, if you're playing baseball, basketball, swimming, soccer, running, cycling. If you lose stability, you're going to give up power and efficiency. It's just that simple. And so what we want to do is try to maximize that stability in the water. So we're already in a dynamic, unstable environment. We want to make sure that we're not creating any additional instability. So one of the things that we can see is you can see a little bit, he's already started kind of on that angle right there. That angle's going to change then these angles of the shoulder a little bit. And what we want to do is, if you think about it this way, if you're a little bit higher on the water, then these angles in the front, it's going to be a lot easier to get more into that high elbow catch position from the very beginning. And you can see he's doing a pretty good job of pulling. You can see kind of the, how low his feet are to the water right here. And again, as we've talked about before, some of this is the endless pool. The current's coming over the back, pressing this back end down a little bit. But it's really just exaggerating a hole that we've got in the stroke, which is, kind of the core and then the legs connection back to the core and the entire fitness around all of that. So here you can see, we've got a little bit of a scissor kick right here. That's causing some, slowdown, obviously, creating more drag, bringing down that back end. You can see, here we've got, that's where he's going. So, the one thing we always want to remember is that whatever direction the head points in, okay, so whatever direction that head is pointing, that's where the body's going to go. So while this looks pretty good like this, a lot of his momentum, his body's going to track that way. So when that goes into open water, he's going to be constantly then just zigzagging around the course instead of just holding this very straight line. Shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So, the scissor kick looks like it's happening after the breath. He's probably breathing a little bit, rotating a little bit too much to get the breath, which is having some other complications as well. So we can see here. So here's the entry. He's breathing a little bit late. You can see that head picking up. So here, if we look, and that's just because of the body position on the water, that picking up the head before the breath. So, pretty close to about 60 degrees, a little bit kind of open. You'd want it somewhere between 30 to 40. And really, the implication that had, again, is stability. So if we look here, so here is this side, a little bit less, again, if we're trying to get 30 to 40, he's about 47. Let's see if I can get a better look at it. Maybe right about there. Yeah, about the same. So, yeah, he could be a little bit more, kind of a little bit more relaxed on the recovery. But you can see kind of the benefit that has. You can see where his hand is right here versus if we go back here. So his hand is in roughly the same place, but midline is more kind of over there. So he's rotating a lot of his body to get the breath. So again, creating some instability. You can see kind of from this angle, that back and forth kind of movement. We want to just be able to hold the same position in the water the whole time. So when we go underwater, you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So here, you can see how much he rotates onto that side to get the breath. And, here's the hand. Midline is kind of over here. There's his shoulder. Typically, most of the leverage is going to be somewhere between these two lines. So he's just way out of position to really get any leverage on the water at the most important part of the stroke. Now, the reason that's happening is because he's unstable. If he was more stable, he'd be able to just replicate the same stroke underneath the water over and over again, regardless of what's going on top. Because, look, the points of leverage don't change in the human body. It's the same spots on the water when we're in the water over and over again. That's why, you hear all this nonsense about triathletes talking about, the differences between a pool stroke and an open water stroke. Look, there isn't. Where the propulsion happens underneath the stroke, underneath on the pull, a good, solid, efficient stroke generating a lot of propulsion looks exactly the same whether you are in the pool or whether you are in open water. It does not change. And, for most of the swims that Ironman puts on, the conditions really aren't that rough. The recovery is going to look largely the same. So here you can see, a little bit of a pause there, and you can see kind of how wide the pull is over on that right side. So, let's see if we can get an angle here. Yeah, it's pretty open. We'll see what it is on this one. Typically, you want this angle right here to be somewhere between about 100 to 110 degrees. You can see he's 150. So it should look more something like that, because here would be midline. Whoops. There's midline. You figure the hand would be right about there. Maybe out a little bit, but not much more than that. And there he'd get a lot of leverage on the water, be able to throw a lot of water to the wall straight behind him, drive himself forward, which is what we're trying to do. So then when we go to the opposite side, I think we got video on the opposite side too. Yeah, get a better look at the right. So here we are. You can see as we're pulling through here, you can kind of see how wide that hand is out here. About 118. Now, some of the issue about going that wide with the hand is that you're going to put a lot of pressure on the top part of the shoulder right there to pull through. Typically, we'll get, you'll see if you get anything, there'll be a little bit of tendonitis right there, kind of a bicep tendonitis. Is usually the most common kind of thing you'll see from a movement pattern like this. And then the other thing is it makes it more difficult to get some of the bigger muscles in your back, particularly your lats, to engage when your hand's kind of out this wide. And then, we can see when he breathes, there's that foot way out there, you know. And then as he comes through, you know, you can see the legs and then that foot way, way down there. So that's all drag that he's pulling against. So all of this becomes just drag that he's pulling against. Because remember, we're trying to get that minimum amount of frontal drag, just like the bike. Minimum amount of frontal drag, still be able to generate power. Okay, so the first thing we did was we swam with the drag socks. They're going to put a lot of pressure, you know, right down the middle of your body. It's also going to put you more into a high elbow catch position. You're just going to have to do it. So we're kind of using some of these constraints to force him to make the movements we want. And you can see he's already starting to kind of drive a little bit more straightforward with stuff over and over again. And then, you know, here was the difference kind of from the before and after with the drag socks. Now, look, this is one session. You know, one session, certainly we're not going to change the world, but, you know, he's making some pretty good progress here just in one session. He's a good athlete. He works hard. And that's kind of the name of the game. If you want to get better in swimming, you got to be focused. You got to focus on the movement you're making. So here's, you know, I pulled up some video just so you guys could see the progress that he's made over the last 2 years. And this is swimming. These are the kind of the small incremental steps that you've got to take to gain efficiency. So 2024, the original camp, he was here. And then we get to, you know, where can he improve still? So, you know, we did a little bit of sculling. And you could see his back end, even with a pull buoy, is down while he's sculling. And he doesn't look like he's totally grabbing the water quite yet, enough to really lift himself, his whole body up in the water. So that would be some of the areas where he'd want to continue to try and improve. And then make that connection between that pressure on his hands when he's swimming, because lift can generate basically forward momentum, and then his core engagement. And we want that connection back and forth between there and there, between his core and between the pressure on his hands. You got to really establish that really, really strong connection. So, yeah, no, it was great having Josh here at the camp, and I know he's got a fun season scheduled ahead of him. And please, you know, if you see him out on the course or, you know, online, make sure to give him a shout out. So thanks again for tuning in.